She lived in a small, quiet town where everyone seemed to know everyone else's business. Life there was simple, predictable, and safe. Most people were content with ordinary routines: waking up, going to work or school, coming home, and repeating the same steps every day. But she was different. Even from a young age, she had a spark that could not be ignored. She carried herself with a quiet curiosity, a desire to create, to express, to reach for something beyond the everyday life that surrounded her. People noticed her energy, but they rarely understood it. Instead, they questioned it. Her days were filled with small responsibilities and chores, as was expected in her home. She helped with cleaning, cooking, and taking care of younger siblings. On the surface, she was just another girl living an ordinary life. But inside, her mind was alive with thoughts and dreams that she could not easily share. She had a talent that came naturally to her, a way of moving, of performing that drew attention, even when she tried to hide it. Sometimes she would practice in the corner of her room, pretending she was invisible, pretending the world would never see her. She imagined stages, audiences, applause, and the quiet satisfaction of pouring herself into something meaningful. Yet, every time she shared even a small part of her talent, the reaction was the same. People laughed politely or shook their heads in doubt. "Why are you wasting your time on this?" they would ask. "You should focus on something more practical." Her teachers suggested she studied harder for exams. Friends said she should stick to hobbies and not think about performing seriously. Even family members who loved her seemed to believe she was chasing something unrealistic. They didn't understand the reason she had for doing it. It was not about fame, money, or recognition. It was about expression, about proving to herself that she could do something extraordinary. She learned to nod and smile, to hide the disappointment that sometimes weighed heavily on her chest. She did not argue, because she knew no one would understand. She could not explain why it mattered so much, why it felt like the only thing that kept her alive inside. So she practiced quietly in the small hours of the morning when no one was awake, when the house was still and safe. She practiced until her fingers ached, until her voice grew hoarse, until every movement felt second nature. Each practice was a secret act of defiance, a promise to herself that she would not give up, no matter how many doubted her. Some days were easier than others. On the good days, she felt unstoppable, like she was touching a part of herself that no one else could reach. She would dance in the sunlight streaming through the window, her movements fluid and free. Music would fill the room, and for those moments, the world outside her small house did not exist. She imagined audiences, cheering and clapping, faces filled with awe. But even in those moments, she remembered the doubt in the eyes of people around her. Their voices echoed in her mind. "You're not ready. You'll fail. This isn't for you." There were times when the weight of doubt pressed heavily on her shoulders. Walking to school, she overheard friends talking about their plans for the future, about exams and careers. She felt a pang of jealousy, not for what they had, but for the ease with which they seemed to fit into the world. She wondered if she was foolish, chasing something that might never make sense to anyone. Sometimes, in the quiet of the night, she would ask herself the same question. Was she wasting her time? Was her reason for performing even valid? And yet she could never stop. Even when the doubts threatened to overwhelm her, she found small moments to keep going. Sometimes it was a smile from a stranger who noticed her talent, a kind word from a teacher who saw potential in her movements, or even just the feeling of her own body responding to the music she loved. Those small sparks reminded her why she kept trying. It was not for approval, not for recognition, but for the feeling of being alive, of expressing something that words could not capture. Her peers continued to question her choices. They didn't understand why she spent hours practicing instead of studying for exams or joining popular clubs. They whispered when she walked by, laughed when she attempted new movements in the schoolyard, and sometimes outright mocked her. She tried not to let it bother her, but it stung. Humans are social creatures, and the need for acceptance is strong. The harder she tried to ignore the doubt, the more she felt it pressing against her, shaping her sense of self. But there was a reason she kept going, a reason she could not yet share. It was rooted in a memory from her childhood, a moment when she realized the power of expressing herself. She remembered a time when she had seen someone perform, someone who moved with a grace and emotion that left her breathless. That performance stayed with her for years, shaping her understanding of what it meant to be truly alive. She wanted to reach that level of honesty, of raw connection, even if no one else understood why. At home, she often found herself alone in her room, practicing movements in front of a small mirror. She studied herself carefully, refining gestures, perfecting expressions, pushing herself to go further than she had ever gone before. Sometimes she stumbled, sometimes she fell, but she always got up again. Every mistake was a lesson, every stumble a small step towards something greater. Her perseverance was quiet, invisible to the world, but it burned brightly within her. She also began to explore other forms of expression. She wrote in notebooks, scribbling thoughts and feelings she could not say aloud. She experimented with drawing and painting, finding that each form of creativity strengthened the others. Performing became a culmination of all her experiences, as a way to combine movement, emotion, and imagination into one powerful statement. Each day, her skill grew, even if no one noticed. Each day, her confidence grew, even if it was fragile and hidden. Her family continued to be concerned. But she found ways to balance responsibilities with her passion. She would wake up early to practice before chores, stay up late to refine movements after finishing homework. Her life was a delicate balance of obligation and desire, of the mundane and the extraordinary. She learned discipline, patience, and resilience. She learned that pursuing a dream was not just about talent, it was about consistency, determination, and the courage to continue when no one else believed in you. As the days passed, her reputation in school remained that of someone unconventional, someone misunderstood. Some admired her from a distance, inspired by her dedication, while others mocked or doubted her openly. She tried not to engage with the negativity, focusing instead on the quiet voice inside that reminded her of her reason. That reason was personal, sacred, and powerful. It gave her strength when the world around her seemed intent on discouraging her. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the sky turned shades of orange and pink, she stood in her room practicing in the golden light. Her body moved with fluidity and grace, each motion telling a story she could not yet explain. For a brief moment, she felt free from judgment, free from doubt, free from the weight of the world's expectations. She closed her eyes and allowed herself to be fully present, fully immersed in the art she loved. In that moment, she remembered why she had started, why she could not stop, and why she had to continue, no matter what anyone else thought. The journey ahead was uncertain. She knew challenges would come, that ridicule and doubt would not disappear overnight. But she also knew that each step she took, each practice session, each moment of dedication brought her closer to proving something important, not to anyone else but to herself. She understood that the true power of her talent lay not in applause or recognition, but in the courage to keep going when the world told her she should stop. And so, she continued. Each day, she faced the whispers, the doubts, the skepticism, and she let them pass through her without taking hold. She held on to her reason, her quiet fire, the secret that drove her to practice, to dream, to perform. The world around her may have doubted her, but she did not doubt herself. Not yet. Not ever. Little did anyone know that the quiet, determined girl practicing alone in her small room was preparing for a moment that would change everything. A moment where doubts would be silenced, where her reason would finally speak for itself, and where the world would see the power she had carried quietly, patiently, for so long. The journey was just beginning, but she was ready to face it, one step, one movement. One heartbeat at a time. Days turned into weeks, and she continued her quiet routine. Practicing in the early mornings and late nights, each day brought new challenges. Sometimes it was exhaustion, sometimes frustration when a movement wouldn't come out the way she imagined it, and sometimes the constant pressure from people around her who didn't understand. But she never gave up. The reason she had for performing was always with her, like a small flame that could not be extinguished, and it gave her the strength to keep moving forward. School became a complicated place for her, while others seemed to glide through their days. Making friends easily and laughing without thought, she carried a weight that no one could see. Some classmates whispered when she passed, calling her unusual or eccentric. Teachers occasionally questioned her priorities, asking why she spent so much time on something they considered a hobby. Even in her own home, there were questions about whether she was being practical, whether she was wasting her potential. She tried to ignore the criticism, but it followed her like a shadow. The doubts whispered in her mind too, especially when she felt tired or overwhelmed. Some nights, she would lie awake, replaying mistakes, thinking of the moments she could have done better. She questioned herself more than anyone else could. But then she would remember the spark, the reason that had carried her through so much already. It was deeply personal, a memory that shaped her desire to perform. No one could take that away, and no one needed to understand it. It was hers, and it gave her purpose. Her practice sessions became more intense as she pushed herself to new limits. She tried new techniques, experimented with different forms of expression, and challenged herself to be better than the day before. Each failure was a lesson, each success a quiet victory. Sometimes she felt alone, but she realized that solitude could be a strength. It allowed her to connect with herself, to explore her emotions without fear of judgment. It gave her space to understand the depth of her talent, to refine her skills, and to discover the power that came from true dedication. There were moments of doubt that were hard to overcome. She would see others achieving recognition, winning awards, or receiving praise, and a small part of her wondered if she would ever reach that point. It was a natural feeling, a human reaction, but she did not let it control her. Instead, she focused on her journey, knowing that comparisons would only distract her from her purpose. She reminded herself that her path was unique, and her reason was her own. Outside of her practice, she began to notice how much her life had shaped her perspective. She saw beauty in small things: a leaf falling from a tree, the way sunlight painted patterns on the floor, the laughter of children playing in the street. These simple moments became a source of inspiration for her performances. She realized that expression was not just about movement or technique. It was about capturing life, emotions, and experiences in a way that connected with others. Her performances were not just about skill, they were about truth. Her relationships with others were complicated. Friends sometimes teased her, not out of malice, but because they didn't understand. They invited her to parties, gatherings, and events, but she often declined, choosing instead to practice or rest. It was lonely at times, but she knew that sacrifices were part of the journey. Those moments of solitude allowed her to focus, to refine her craft, and to stay true to the reason she had chosen this path. She also began to notice subtle support from unexpected places. A teacher would smile when she showed improvement. A classmate would nod in acknowledgement of her dedication, or a stranger might compliment her talent when they caught a glimpse of her performing in public. These small gestures reminded her that not everyone doubted her, and that recognition, though rare, could be found in quiet ways. It reinforced the idea that she was on the right path, even if it was a lonely one. Her personal growth became more apparent as time went on. She learned patience, understanding that mastery was not instant. She learned resilience, realizing that setbacks were part of life and not a sign to give up. She learned self-awareness, becoming more attuned to her emotions and motivations. Each of these lessons strengthened her reason, giving her the tools to continue even when external support was limited as she practiced. She began to explore the emotional depth of her performances. She learned to channel her feelings, joy, sorrow, frustration, hope, into her movements. She discovered that vulnerability could be powerful, that showing emotion could create a connection that technique alone could not. This understanding deepened her artistry and gave her performances a sense of authenticity that began to touch those who witnessed even brief glimpses of her talent. Her family, while still concerned, began to notice her growth. They saw her dedication, the discipline she brought to her practice, and the way she carried herself with quiet confidence. Though they did not fully understand her reason, they began to respect the effort she put in and the passion that fueled her. Their questions became less about practicality and more about curiosity, asking her what she was learning, how she felt, and what inspired her. It was a small but meaningful shift, one that gave her more courage to continue. Despite progress, the road was not without obstacles. There were times when her body ached from practice, when her mind felt overwhelmed by doubt, when the world seemed to question her purpose at every turn. She faced rejection silently, applied for opportunities, and was turned down. Sometimes wondered if her efforts were in vain. Yet in those moments, she reminded herself of the reason she started. She practiced not for applause, not for recognition, but to honor the spark that had been inside her for so long. Her performances became more intentional. She began to study other performers, learning from their movements, their expressions, their ways of telling stories through action. She observed carefully not to copy, but to understand the nuances that made performances impactful. She experimented, integrated new techniques into her own style, and continuously refined her craft. The process was slow, demanding, and sometimes exhausting, but she welcomed it. Each challenge brought her closer to the realization of her potential. Through all of this, her inner strength grew. She developed a quiet confidence that did not rely on others' validation. She understood that the world's doubts were not a reflection of her worth or ability. Her reason for performing became a guiding force, helping her navigate both successes and setbacks with grace and determination. It was a reason rooted in truth, in passion, and in the belief that her voice, her movements, her expression mattered. She also became more reflective, thinking about the impact she wanted to have on others. She realized that her journey was not just about achieving personal goals, but about inspiring others to believe in themselves, to follow their passions, and to pursue their reasons even in the face of doubt. This understanding added depth to her performances and gave her a sense of responsibility and purpose that transcended personal ambition. As the days continued, her practice and growth began to build quietly but steadily. People around her began to notice small changes the way she carried herself. The focus in her eyes, the way her movements became more confident and fluid. Some were surprised, some were curious, and some still doubted. But she had learned to carry herself without seeking approval. She had learned to value her own belief above the skepticism of others. She also discovered the importance of patience and timing. She realized that her moment would come, that there would be a stage, an audience, or an opportunity where her dedication and talent could shine. Until then, she focused on preparation, honing her craft, and staying true to her reason. She understood that preparation was invisible work, often unnoticed. But it was what would make her performance unforgettable when the right time arrived. Her journey in this part of her life was about growth, resilience, and understanding. It was about recognizing the power of her own reason, the strength that comes from quiet dedication, and the beauty of pursuing something meaningful even when no one else believes. She had not yet faced the moment that would define her publicly, but she was readying herself, building the foundation for the day when doubt would be silenced, and her reason would finally speak each day. As she moved through practice, reflection, and quiet persistence, she became more aware of her own potential. She understood that the doubts of others were a challenge, but not a limit. She realized that her reason was her compass, guiding her through uncertainty, rejection, and struggle. She learned that the journey itself, the growth and effort, was as significant as the destination. And she knew that when the right moment arrived, she would be ready to step forward and show the world the power of belief, dedication, and the truth behind her reason. After months of quiet preparation, a chance appeared that could change everything. It was unexpected, a small announcement in school about an upcoming talent show. She had never considered performing in front of a large audience at school, but something inside her stirred at the thought. It was an opportunity to show her dedication, her skills, and, more importantly, her reason. Yet, she also knew this would bring the skeptics closer. They would watch, judge, and expect her to fail. Her first reaction was nervousness. Thoughts raced through her mind. Could she really do it? What if they laughed? What if everything she had worked for was not enough? But then she remembered the months of practice, the quiet mornings, the late nights, the aches and frustrations, and the triumphs that no one had witnessed. She realized that this was not just about impressing others. It was about stepping forward with courage. About giving her reason a voice in a world that had doubted her for too long. She began planning carefully. Every movement, every pause, every expression was considered. She rehearsed repeatedly, sometimes in front of mirrors, sometimes in empty rooms, imagining the audience and the weight of their expectations. She studied her feelings, her emotions, and the way they could be communicated through her performance. She discovered a depth to her expression she hadn't fully realized before. Her performances were no longer just about technique, they were about truth, vulnerability, and connection. Meanwhile, people around her began to notice her commitment. Some friends were surprised at her determination and tried to encourage her, even if they didn't fully understand. Teachers watched quietly, seeing a transformation that could not be ignored. Yet, the whispers and doubts still lingered. There were those who commented on how unlikely it was that she could succeed, who assumed that when the day came, she would falter. It only fueled her resolve to prepare more, to become more confident in the power of her own reason. As the day of the event approached, her nervousness intensified. The auditorium was filling with students, teachers, and parents. The room buzzed with chatter, laughter, and expectation. She could feel the eyes on her as she waited for her turn, some filled with curiosity, some with disbelief, some with quiet judgment. Every step closer to the stage brought a mix of fear and anticipation. Her heart raced, her palms were sweaty, but she clung to the internal calm she had cultivated over months of practice. This was the moment she had been preparing for. The moment to show herself more than anyone else. Backstage, she found a quiet corner and closed her eyes, taking deep breaths. She recalled every early morning, every late night, every tear and triumph. She remembered why she had started, the spark that had been inside her from the beginning. It was not for applause, recognition, or approval. It was for herself, to honor her journey, and to speak a truth that had been hidden from everyone else. This reflection grounded her, and the fear slowly transformed into focus. When her name was called, she walked onto the stage, her movements deliberate and confident. At first, the audience was restless, unsure what to expect. Some whispered, some laughed, some shook their heads in doubt. She could feel the weight of their skepticism pressing down on her, but she did not falter. She let her body speak, letting every gesture, every expression, every movement communicate her reason. She moved with purpose, with honesty, and with a depth that drew the audience in. As she continued, something remarkable began to happen. The whispers quieted. The laughter faded. People leaned forward, captivated by the emotion and authenticity of her performance. She felt the energy of the room shift, felt the connection between herself and the audience grow stronger. She was no longer performing for approval, she was performing for truth. And in that truth, the room began to recognize her talent, her dedication, and the power of her reason. Her movements told a story, one that words could not capture. The highs and lows of her journey, the struggles, the doubts, the perseverance, and the triumphs all were expressed in her performance. The audience began to understand without a single word spoken the depth of her dedication and the importance of her reason. Every gesture, every expression, every pause was intentional. Drawing the viewers into her world, by the end of her performance, the room was silent. For a moment, no one moved, no one spoke, and no one applauded. It was a silence filled with realization, a recognition of the effort, talent, and emotion they had witnessed. She stood there, catching her breath, feeling a sense of calm and fulfillment. She had faced the doubters, the skeptics, and her own fears. And she had emerged not just intact, but stronger then. Slowly, the applause began. At first tentative, then growing louder, more confident, more genuine. People were clapping, some standing, some cheering, and some wiping away tears. The room was filled with recognition, not just for her skill, but for the courage and honesty she had displayed. The skeptics were silent now, their doubts silenced by the undeniable truth of her performance. Backstage, she felt a mix of relief, joy, and pride. She had proven to herself that she could face fear and doubt and emerge with her truth intact. She realized that this moment was not the end, but a beginning. A beginning of new possibilities, new opportunities, and new understanding of what she could achieve. She felt a sense of connection, not just with the audience, but with herself. And that connection was more powerful than any applause or recognition could ever be. After the event, people approached her with congratulations, questions, and admiration. Some admitted they had doubted her, but now saw her dedication and talent in a new light. Others were curious about her process, her preparation, and the reason behind her performances. She smiled, quietly proud, knowing that the true victory was not in their words, but in her own understanding of her strength and ability. Her journey continued, but now it had momentum. She realized that doubt would always exist, that fear would always appear, and that challenges would continue to test her. But she also knew that she had the power to overcome them, that her reason was stronger than skepticism, and that dedication and courage could transform not just her life, but the way others saw her. She had faced the moment she had been preparing for, and she had done so with honesty, vulnerability, and strength. That night as she walked home, the quiet streets felt different. The world felt bigger, yet somehow more within reach. She had taken a step that no one else could take for her, and it had changed everything. She felt a new sense of confidence, a deeper understanding of herself, and a renewed commitment to continue her journey. She knew that the challenges ahead would be many, but she also knew that she had proven, first to herself, that she could rise to meet them. This experience shaped her perspective in ways she could not have imagined. She realized that preparation, dedication, and self-belief were more important than immediate recognition. She learned that the true power of performance lay not in impressing others, but in expressing oneself fully and authentically. And she understood that her reason, her personal drive, was the most important force guiding her journey. With this realization, she felt ready to face whatever came next, knowing that one performance could change how the world saw her, but more importantly, how she saw herself. The day of her biggest performance arrived, and the weight of anticipation hung heavy in the air. Months of preparation, practice, and quiet determination led to this moment. She could feel the tension in the room as the audience gathered, the hum of chatter, the rustle of programs, and the occasional cough breaking the silence. Many people had come out of curiosity, some expecting to see her fail, some out of genuine interest, and a few who simply wanted to witness the culmination of her hard work. She could sense the doubt lingering in the air, almost as if it were tangible, pressing down on her shoulders. Backstage, she paced quietly, taking deep breaths and centering herself. She recalled every early morning, every late night, every aching muscle, every moment of self-doubt that she had pushed through. She thought about the small flame that had kept her going, the reason she had pursued this path despite the skepticism of everyone around her. That reason was hers alone, deeply personal, unshakable, and powerful. She closed her eyes and felt it ignite within her, filling her with a calm confidence she hadn't felt before. This was her moment. She would let her reason speak without words, without explanation. Let her performance reveal the truth. As she stepped onto the stage, a hush fell over the audience. Some leaned forward in anticipation. Others crossed their arms, waiting to see if she would falter. She took a deep breath and began. Her movements were deliberate, precise, yet fluid, carrying a weight of emotion that drew the audience in immediately. She moved with grace and intensity, expressing feelings that words could never capture. The story of her journey unfolded through every motion: the struggle, the determination, the quiet moments of practice, and the strength she had found within herself. At first, there were subtle reactions. A shift in posture here, a widened eye there. People began to lean in, as if trying to understand what was happening on stage. She could feel the energy of the room changing. Doubt was still present, but curiosity had taken root. Her performance was not just skillful, it was raw, honest, and filled with meaning. Every step, every gesture, every pause carried a piece of her story, and the audience felt it. They were no longer watching a performance. They were witnessing a journey, Her body moved with the rhythm of her emotions, translating years of quiet dedication into visible expression. The highs and lows of her experiences flowed through her movements, telling a story of perseverance, struggle, and triumph. The audience, initially skeptical, began to fall silent, captivated by the authenticity of her performance. The room was no longer filled with chatter or laughter. It was filled with attention, focus, and awe. As she continued, she could feel the connection growing stronger. Each movement resonated with someone in the audience, evoking memories, emotions, and understanding. She realized that her reason, the deeply personal motivation that had carried her through so much, was now visible to others without a single word being spoken. The silence in the room was not empty, it was the sound of realization. It's a recognition of the dedication and truth she had brought to the stage. Her reason, once hidden and questioned, was now undeniable. The performance reached its climax, a moment of intense emotion and precision. She pushed herself to the limits, drawing on every ounce of energy, skill, and passion she had cultivated over the years. Her movements became more powerful, more expressive, more convincing. The audience was held in a state of rapt attention, completely immersed in the story she was telling. No one dared to interrupt. No one whispered. No. One laughed. Every eye was fixed on her. Every heart seemed to beat in response to her performance. In the final moments, she slowed, letting the last gestures linger in the air, creating a sense of completion, of resolution. She stood still, breathing heavily, her heart pounding, her mind clear. The room remained silent for a few long seconds, the weight of what they had just witnessed settling over everyone. Then, slowly, applause began to rise. At first, tentative, then louder, stronger, and more genuine. People stood, cheered, clapped, and some wiped away tears. The silence that had filled the room during her performance transformed into a wave of appreciation and recognition. She felt a mix of relief, joy, and fulfillment. She had done it. She had faced the doubt, the skepticism, and her own fears, and she had emerged victorious. But more importantly, she had communicated her reason, her personal motivation, and her truth to the world. It was not just a performance. It was a statement, a revelation, and a proof of the power of perseverance and belief in oneself after the performance. People approached her with congratulations, questions, and admiration. Some admitted they had doubted her. Some were amazed at her skill. Others wanted to understand what had driven her to achieve such depth in her performance. She smiled quietly, knowing that the true impact was not in their words, but in the realization that her reason had been seen, felt, and acknowledged. She had spoken without words, and the world had listened. Backstage, she reflected on what had just happened. Months of preparation, countless hours of practice, moments of doubt, and quiet perseverance had led to this moment. She understood that her journey was far from over, but this performance had marked a turning point. She had proven to herself and to others that dedication, authenticity, and courage could overcome doubt. She had shown that reason, when deeply personal and pursued with sincerity, could speak louder than any skepticism or criticism that night. As she walked home through the quiet streets, she felt a sense of peace and empowerment. The stars above seemed to shine a little brighter, the air felt lighter, and the world felt more open. She had faced the audience, the doubts, and her fears, and had emerged stronger, more confident, and more connected to her purpose than ever before. She knew challenges would continue to come, but she had discovered an inner strength that could carry her through anything. Her family and friends, who had watched the performance or heard about it afterward, expressed their amazement and pride. Even those who had doubted her could not deny the impact of what she had achieved, but she did not seek their approval. She sought only the fulfillment that came from honoring her reason and giving it full expression. She had found validation not in external praise, but in the knowledge that she had stayed true to herself, her purpose, and her journey. In the days that followed, she reflected on the performance and its significance. She understood that this moment had changed not only the way others saw her, but also the way she saw herself. She had faced fear, doubt, and pressure, and had proven that perseverance, Authenticity and self-belief could transform uncertainty into achievement. Her reason, once questioned and doubted, had spoken for itself. Silencing skepticism and inspiring recognition, she realized that true power did not lie in talent alone, nor in recognition or applause. It lay in the courage to pursue something deeply meaningful, to express it fully, and to trust in oneself even when the world does not understand. Her performance had been a testament to this truth, a vivid reminder that dedication and authenticity could overcome doubt and reveal the strength within. As she continued her journey, she carried the lessons of this performance with her. She knew that challenges and doubts would continue, life would test her in new ways, and that perseverance would always be required. But she also knew that she had the power to rise, to express, and to inspire through her reason. Her journey was not defined by external approval, but by her commitment to herself and the truth she carried. And so, she moved forward, quietly determined. Empowered by the knowledge that one performance, one moment of courage and authenticity could change the way the world saw her, and more importantly, the way she saw herself. The room had been silenced, not by force, not by words, but by the undeniable power of her dedication, her honesty, and the reason that had driven her from the very beginning. After the performance that silenced the room, life did not suddenly become easy, but everything had changed. She walked through the quiet streets at night, feeling a mix of relief, pride, and calm determination. The applause and recognition she received were wonderful. But the most important thing was the understanding she had gained about herself. She had faced doubt, fear, and judgment, and had emerged stronger and more confident than ever. The journey she had undertaken, full of silent effort and persistence, had finally been validated not by the world, but by her own understanding of her power and reason. The days after the performance were filled with reflection. She remembered the months of early mornings and late nights, the aches, the tears, the moments she had felt like giving up. She thought about the small sparks of encouragement she had received from friends, teachers, and even strangers. Every small gesture, every moment of perseverance, had built her into the person who could stand on that stage and express herself fully. She realized that the journey itself, with all its challenges, had shaped her more than the applause or recognition ever could. People approached her with curiosity and admiration. Some admitted that they had doubted her. Some were inspired by her determination. And some simply wanted to know what had driven her to achieve such a powerful performance. She smiled quietly, feeling a sense of fulfillment that could not be expressed in words. She had proven to herself that she could face fear and skepticism, and she had done it on her own terms. The doubts of others no longer held power over her, and she had discovered that inner strength was far more valuable than any external validation. Her family, who had once worried about her choices, began to see the depth of her dedication and the value of her efforts. They no longer questioned her path as much. Instead, they asked about her experiences, her feelings, and what had inspired her journey. The change in their attitude was subtle but meaningful. It reinforced the idea that true understanding often takes time, and that respect and recognition are earned through consistent effort and authenticity. She had earned not just their respect, but a deeper connection with them, based on the recognition of her perseverance and truth. As she reflected on her journey, she understood that this moment was not the end of her story, but the beginning of a new chapter. She had faced one stage, one audience, and one set of doubters, and she had triumphed. But life would continue to present challenges, new opportunities, and moments of uncertainty. She realized that the lessons she had learned, the importance of dedication, self-belief, and authenticity, would guide her through all future endeavors. Her reason, once questioned and doubted, had been revealed as a powerful force that could not be ignored. In the following weeks, she found herself thinking more deeply about the impact of her journey. She saw that her efforts had inspired others, that her determination had shown that perseverance could overcome doubt. People who had once dismissed her now approached her with genuine interest, asking for advice or seeking encouragement. She realized that her story, her dedication, and her courage had the power to influence others, not just through words, but through action. Her journey became an example of how belief in oneself could transform challenges into opportunities and doubts into recognition. She continued to practice, knowing that growth never stops. Her journey was not just about one performance or one moment of recognition. It was about continuous improvement, self-discovery, and the pursuit of her reason. Each day, she worked on refining her skills, exploring new ways to express herself, and deepening her understanding of her craft. The discipline she had developed, the resilience she had built, and the confidence she had gained were now part of her identity, guiding her toward new achievements and experiences. The challenges she faced along the way had also taught her empathy and patience. She understood that everyone has doubts, fears, and obstacles, and that perseverance often requires quiet strength and courage. She learned to appreciate the struggles of others and to offer support when she could. Her journey had not only strengthened her own spirit, but it had also made her more compassionate, more aware, and more willing to help others find their own paths to self-discovery and fulfillment. She also recognized the importance of balance in her life. While dedication and practice were crucial, she understood that rest, reflection, and connection with loved ones were equally important. She made time for moments of joy, laughter, and simple pleasures, understanding that these experiences enriched her life and deepened her performances. Her growth was holistic, encompassing not just skill and talent, but emotional intelligence, resilience, and self-awareness. As she prepared for new opportunities, she felt a sense of quiet confidence. She no longer needed to prove herself to others. Her validation came from within. The doubts that had once threatened to derail her journey were now a distant memory, replaced by the knowledge that her reason, her dedication,